All right, going to spend a few minutes talking about the Dermlite DL4 and how it is used. Now, just as a reminder, this is not a discussion of dermoscopy in general. This is more a discussion of the use of the DL4 itself. The topic of dermoscopy is a huge one, and if you do have staff members there that are interested in learning more, certainly let me know. We don't have a course ourselves, but can definitely point you in the right direction as far as which courses would be good. So first thing, let's just talk about charging it, okay? The DL4 is a rechargeable device. It's recharged by way of USB cable, similar to Android phones, and this is a micro USB connection. And one thing I think is worth mentioning, something that is actually not that uncommon is for customers to send us messages asking us to urgently send them a set of the Dermlite micro USB cables because theirs either broke or they lost it and now they can't charge their DL4. And honestly, this applies to the other rechargeable devices as well. But as much as we would love to sell you the Dermlite brand cables, any quality micro USB cable will work. Okay, so if it's something you're planning ahead of time that you'd like to get some extra cables, feel free to order them from our site. And we also have the magnetic quick connect cables, which we can talk about in another video. But point is that if you find yourself in a bind and you really need to get your Dermlite charged and you don't have the Dermlite brand USB cable available, just go down to Target or Walmart, or really nowadays almost any grocery store, and look for a micro USB connection. Now, speaking of charging, there is something about charging that's important to know. And this is what I want to show you. Notice what happens when I start the charging process. Notice these lights pulsing. So when you go to charge your DL4, after you plug it in, if it's charging correctly, you should see these lights pulse as we see here. And these lights also serve as a charge level indicator. So there are 4 lights, 3 of which are pulsing now. So that tells us that we're at about 3/4 battery charge, and probably given another 20 minutes or so, it will show a full charge with all 4 pulsing. But yeah, bottom line is that when you plug in your DL4 to charge it, you should see these lights pulsing as we see here. And if you don't, and especially if you're experiencing any problems with your DL4 not working or not holding a charge for very long at all, then that would be the first thing to check. And if it were to continue giving you problems, then just let us know. I hate to get off on too much of a tangent, but it's worth mentioning that battery replacement is probably the most common issue that happens not just with DL4s, but all dermatoscopes that are rechargeable. Similar to your cell phone, after a year or two, it's not uncommon to start noticing that it's just not holding a charge as well as it used to. And then with enough time, it will just flat out stop working. The batteries are warranted for 1 year on the DL4s. Everything else is a 10-year warranty. Similar to other rechargeable electronic devices, the batteries themselves can only be warranted for so long. So again, any issues with charging or the DL4 not working, especially if it's been a year or two, consider the battery, and any questions, just let us know. Okay, so now to turn on the DL4, the button is here, typically where the thumb would be placed for those who hold it in their right hand. So just a quick press turns it on. Now, if you notice that you press it again, it stays on, but seems to switch modes. Okay, now I'm going to turn this around to show you. So let me start first turning on, tap it again, okay? And then if I just repeat that process, it will alternate between these 2 modes. To turn it off, I press and hold. Now, the 2 primary lighting modes for not just the DL4, but all dermatoscopes are polarized and non-polarized. Polarized is by far the most common lighting option that most will choose when performing skin exams. And for that reason, it's the default first lighting option that comes on. Okay, so let me tap it just once, and you can see all of those lights. That's going to be polarized. Press it one more time. That's the non-polarized mode. Press and hold, turn it off. Now, polarized lighting, it's filtered lighting. The light that is returned to the viewer through the eyepiece is a bit less bright than the initial brightness produced by the LED bulbs, and that's because it's been filtered. And for that reason, with the polarized light, you see more bulbs lit. Okay, so if you're ever unsure, not just with the DL4, but any dermatoscope, alternate the lighting options, and where you see more LEDs lit up, that's going to be the polarized lighting. And since non-polarized either isn't filtered at all or is less filtered, it doesn't need as many LEDs to produce the same amount of effective light. And so that's why fewer LEDs lit up is going to be the option for non-polarized. And I know I mentioned we're not going to get into dermoscopy itself, but just as a basic item worth mentioning, polarized light is what you want to use in order to see a bit deeper just beneath the skin surface. And the reason is that the very top surface of skin, it's going to want to reflect light. And that's why in traditional non-polarized mode, as we see here, that's going to be the mode that you use if you really want to see surface skin features. For example, let's say I want to see my actual fingerprints. Okay, those are on the surface. So to see that, this is non-polarized. It's letting me see the surface features, and I can see the dermatoglyphs, the fingerprints. But what's going to happen if I want to see something deeper, which is typically like your pigmented lesions, and even basal and squamous cell skin cancers? We do want to see deeper into the skin. So to get past that very top layer shine, that's where polarized light comes in. And because polarized light is generally the most effective for visualizing atypical pigmented lesions as well as basal and squamous cell carcinomas, then that's primarily going to be the mode that's used in dermatology. Again, probably 90+% of the time, and therefore is going to be the most common first go-to lighting option when you very first tap the power button. Okay, so again, one press, polarized, press one more time, non-polarized, to turn it off, press and hold. All right, next thing to talk about is this faceplate. There's a rotating dial here, kind of similar to cameras, where you can rotate that and this faceplate extends out. Now, I just mentioned about cameras, and I think that that is actually the reason that there's a lot of confusion when people first start using these regarding this faceplate. This faceplate serves as a physical, clear glass barrier, but it does not contribute or play any role in focusing the image that you're looking at. Okay, I say that because sometimes people, they'll get going and want to start examining lesions, and they look and they're trying to focus the lesion, and in the process they're kind of fiddling with the faceplate. The faceplate doesn't play any role whatsoever in doing that. Okay, when it comes to examining lesions and getting into focus, that is purely a matter of you adjusting and moving the dermatoscope closer, very minimally closer, farther away, closer, farther away, until it comes into focus for you. Okay, and what we're looking at here, this is about the correct focal length for the DL4. Okay, so if you go and you press it right up against the lesion, you're not going to be in focus. If you're too far away, likewise, you're not going to be in focus. Typically, when you're going to examine a lesion, you're going to be about this far away. Okay, but again, it's up to you based on all the variables, including your own eyesight. It's up to you to kind of adjust it and move it back and forth ever so slightly until the lesion comes into focus. So then what purpose does the faceplate serve? First, it helps to protect the inside, if you will, of the dermatoscope. You can imagine if the faceplate is not in place, and I'm just going to pop it off here, there are more nooks and crannies inside here that dust and dirt and whatnot could enter, whereas the faceplate in place helps to prevent that from happening. The faceplate also has the reticle, those tiny lines that are on the lens. Those allow you to measure a lesion without pulling out your ruler. You can actually measure it based on what you're seeing through the dermatoscope. Now it's 10 millimeters, so if it goes beyond 10 millimeters, you're out of luck. But if it's 10 millimeters or less, the reticle can help you to determine the diameter of the lesion that you're seeing. But the real purpose of the faceplate is to give you a physical barrier against which you can press the dermatoscope for those who do want to do contact dermoscopy. Okay, so contact dermoscopy is kind of the older method of doing dermoscopy. It's where you would take a liquid. Now, traditionally it was oil, but you can also use alcohol. Some will even use water, but the intention is to wet the surface of the skin, and then you physically press the dermatoscope up against the lesion. And the combination of the pressure and the liquid, that helps to cut down glare. You see just a bit deeper into the skin. And so the reason the plate extends out is because, again, remember what I was saying about getting the lesion into focus. If you want to see the lesion in focus, but yet you also want to see how it appears under that glass faceplate with the oil cutting out any glare, the only way to do that is by adjusting this dial. So it would involve looking through the eyepiece while you apply gentle contact and pressure to the lesion, and you adjust the dial until you are in focus. But again, it's not because there's any lens effect within the faceplate. In this case, adjusting the dial is simply allowing the primary lens to move back and forth until it is in focus. It's the same effect as you simply moving back and forth as we see here, okay? But if we want that contact with the oil or alcohol, the only way to do that is with that faceplate. Now, I'm just going to be honest. If you did a survey of dermatologists and other physicians across the board, many, I would say the majority, would probably admit to hardly ever using the non-polarized mode, and many of those would also admit to hardly ever performing contact dermoscopy. Now, when you start getting really into the academic side of dermoscopy, there are some who do see the benefit of performing contact dermoscopy in addition to polarized dermoscopy. The bottom line is that, as a general rule, if your dermatoscope has polarized lighting, as does the DL4 and most other modern dermatoscopes, with polarized lighting, you generally do not need to perform contact dermoscopy. Again, all because polarized lighting helps to negate the need to do that. Now, before I move on away from the faceplate, as you can gather from everything I've mentioned, the faceplate itself, if you are not performing contact dermoscopy, technically the faceplate is not a crucial item. Now, I say that because every now and then we get messages from customers who say accidentally dropped their DL4, or a colleague accidentally knocked it and they crack the faceplate. And now they're bothered because they can't use their DL4 because a big crack is running through the field of vision. And so they urgently want us to send them a new faceplate. Certainly it's understandable, but the point is that if you experience any deep scratches, cracks, anything that's obscuring your vision, and that is originating within the faceplate, then just take it off. Take it off and order a new one. And then in the meantime, just obviously you can't perform contact dermoscopy. You'll be performing non-contact dermoscopy only, but just be careful. Try to avoid getting too much dirt or dust on the inside. But again, if that faceplate is damaged or causing any issues, just take it off, order a new one, and be careful about using this, not getting it too dirty in the meantime while you're waiting for the new one to arrive. Okay, moving on. Now, before I talk about these other two buttons, just know that if you feel comfortable with the information that you've been presented with so far as turning it on, focusing it, and possibly using the faceplate for contact dermoscopy, that's really all you need in order to use the DL4 in the clinic. These other two buttons are kind of extras, if you will. Okay, so first of all, notice the color of this button. It's kind of an amber, orange, copper color. In the DL4 and the DL3, there's a feature called Pigment Boost. Now, Pigment Boost is essentially, it's the addition of amber orange lighting. You know, there's debate about how much of a difference it makes, but the bottom line is that it adds another color hue to what you're seeing, especially for pigmented lesions. So if you're evaluating a lesion and you would like to also evaluate it with Pigment Boost lighting, then you would just press this button, this amber orange kind of copper color button. When I press that button, it adds those amber orange LEDs to the mix. And watch what happens if I take that same button and rather than tapping it once, what if I press and hold it? So watch what happens. So although most of us think of Plus as being in addition to, Pigment Boost Plus is actually the option of only using the amber orange lighting. Again, opinions vary about the benefit of doing so, but just know, to use Pigment Boost, the amber orange lighting in addition, you press once. To use Pigment Boost Plus, in which you would only see amber orange lighting, you press and hold. And press one more time, and that brings you back to your white LED lighting. Okay. All right, so that's the Pigment Boost lighting. So what about this silver button on the other side? This button actually has two different features. When you first turn on the DL4, again, it defaults towards polarized lighting, and if you press the button one more time quickly, it gives you the non-polarized lighting. Okay, polarized, non-polarized. If somebody prefers not to use the power button to select between polarized and non-polarized, then the silver button here to the side can do that as well. Okay, so I'm going to just tap it quickly. Polarized, non-polarized. polarized, non-polarized. However, this silver button has a secondary feature as well. Watch what happens. So let's say I'm unpolarized. Rather than quickly tapping the button, watch what happens if I press and hold. Did you see that? It's a very, very subtle difference in lighting. Press and hold, a little bit brighter. I'm going to press and hold it again, and it's going to get just slightly dimmer. Okay? All right, let's go to non-polarized lighting. Okay? Same thing. Let me press and hold. You see how it dimmed just a little bit? I'm going to press and hold again. And you see how it brightened up just a little bit. So these are the two brightness modes that are mentioned in the DL4 literature. You know, I've actually taken a light meter at focal distance. The brightness of the DL4, at least in the tests that I ran, it would hover between 25 and 30 kilolux. And out of curiosity, I tested the difference of the brightness levels, and it would provide about a 3 or 4 kilolux difference of variation. Brightest, let's say, would be 25 kilolux. If I pressed and held the silver button and it went into a slightly less bright mode, it would then be around 21 or 22 kilolux. Okay, so we're not talking about a huge difference, but it is an option. Again, I would say more for the academic-minded, the art and science of dermoscopy. If that is something that interests you, then the DL4, it gives you all of those options. It gives you the polarized and the non-polarized. And with this copper button, it allows you to add pigment boost lighting or press and hold pigment boost lighting alone. It allows you to perform contact dermoscopy if you choose, and it allows you to evaluate lesions with slight variations in lighting to see if any features stand out more with that variation. Okay, but again, in the end, 90% of physicians, 90% of the time, are going to be turning it on, using it in polarized white LED lighting mode, not extending the faceplate, just leaving it as is, focusing in on the lesion, and then turning it off. All those extras, they're cool to have, but for most people, most of the time, you won't be needing them. But at least hopefully you now have an idea of what's available. All right, thanks.